Tuaibh. Agus ceir mé fáilte. Is mé sé drolín. Agus an bhil go má. Peoples, it is your friend the Wren. And I just did the same video that I'm doing right now for you guys. That was 30 minutes long, and for some reason it just stopped. So in my dedication to get this video done, I'm doing it again. Because I love you guys. No, I really do. Anybody that watches my videos? Anybody that can tolerate me? So tonight's video is viewer requests. Earlier today, a friend, Heather, on Twitter asked me the question of, well, what would a video be like about the Druids, Druid, that was their role within community, non-spiritually related. Okay, good topic. I'm more than happy to oblige. Also, somebody brought up the torque that I often wear. I'm not wearing it now, but yes, it's gold. Now, you said it was big. It's really not. I will compare it for you to my son Deglin's torque. You ready? Right? Okay. Now this will be Cullen's torque. Now Kieran doesn't have his torque yet, and neither does Freya. But my wife has two. And that is that. Now they don't wear them now because they're little. Though the boys will get theirs when they turn 18. So back to the topic at hand. What did these Druids do in their daily lives that was non-spiritual? That's kind of a loaded topic, because for us to say what did they do that was non-spiritual, everything that they did was spiritual. Their entire lives and how they viewed the world was much different than how we do today. Everything had a sense of magic behind it. The gods were everywhere. They were in everything. Now, it's understandably easy for us to separate these things. This is magical, this is spiritual, and this is mundane. Christianity does this very easily in our culture. You know, you go to church on Sunday, or most people don't. Most people go to, to Mass on, Easter and Christmas. But, for those that do walk their walk, they do. They go to church on Sunday, and that's that. And then throughout the week, it's kind of just this hodgepodge. It's like a hobby. No one's really dedicated. They're not living their faith the way our ancient ancestors did in their culture. So you can't really separate, the mundane from the spiritual in their context. So these roles that they fulfilled within society are always going to have this spiritual side to them, because that's their culture. You cannot separate the faith from the culture. And Neo-Druidry does that. Oftentimes they are simply just focused on faith, focused on the spirituality, and not all of the beautiful aspects of the culture. But that's another video, and I've already talked about that in some other videos. Later. So, what did they do? We know through history that they're oftentimes mentioned as philosophers. This concept of the immortality of the soul. With Pythagoras, sometimes their story, obtaining this type of wisdom from Druids to bring it back. That's neither here nor there. We don't really know if that was actual. Okay? But being a philosopher, a lover of wisdom. What wisdom? Of teachers of natural philosophy, is often said. We have them as judges, not necessarily keepers of peace, even though that's kind of the goal when you're living in a warrior society, but those that would maintain law, to make sure that sentences were executed and sought that people had justice. Justice is important. We're talking about a culture that these laws were handed down for thousands of years. Now, your whole system of monetary stuff is based on cattle and goods, not coinage. You know, you could ritualistically fast against even the High King or your neighbor who wronged you by performing a truscad. Truscad was hunger strike. You would not eat. You would starve yourself to shame the person, to have justice. Now, their culture allowed for homosexuality. Their culture allowed for a woman to divorce her husband, for a woman to lead, to be a warrior, to be a queen, to be... they had equal rights in a way that these women did not have in the Roman world. These laws of ours protected the handicapped. They protected the children. They protected the old, the sick, the poor. These laws are not found throughout the Mediterranean. So acting as a judge, as a Brehon, was something that a druid could do. They were advisors to kings. And when I say kings, I mean like chieftains as well, not just like an ardri, like a high king. Might have had a bigger council. What a chieftain might have a druid. Basically, somebody who's very educated, of the elite class, that has higher education, that is able to give sound advice. We have them as poets and musicians, because basically they trained as poets for 12 years to be what you would say like a PhD level, 12 years, like a doctor of poetry, a professor. And they learned by rote like 350 stories and different poetic compositions and the use of grammar and syntax and knowing the Ogham language and how to use it for all sorts of different things as a mnemonic device. And it's funny that we talk about poetry in Ireland because when the Gael come to Ireland, the first person to step foot upon the land from the Gael, when they, not the Tuatha Dé Danann, but the Gael, he's not a warrior, he's not a druid, he's a poet. Poetry in Ireland to this day is still considered a very honorable, respected craft that's been passed down since the beginning. Being a warrior poet. I know it's cliche with the whole Braveheart thing, right? But it's true. Being a poet is an important role. The poet had a certain legal right within Ireland at many different phases of history where they could be expected a wage, and if you didn't pay them, there could be consequences. There could be public satire. And these satires, poetry was often sung. That's something that's often not talked about. That these poems were not just da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da, It's not just meter and rhyme that, flow when you read it. Poetry was often sung. Poetry was like a condensed, powerful story, like a Shawnee, a storyteller. A poet had trained as well, that when they delivered a satire, it was a scary thing because it was said to be they could deliver blemishes and boils on the face. They could blast you with words. And you would be publicly shamed. You could be exiled from your community. Like, if I'm a very educated person and well-respected within the community, and you're acting the maggot over there, if I point at you because you're misbehaving or causing a ruckus during something important going on, now if I point at you, it's much different if, hold on a second. All right. Much different in a social situation where you're perhaps drunk and being disruptive, or making threats, just being a fucking gobshite. The poet, and this is passed on to them via the Druid training. If I point at you, it's much different if I point at you like this. You. Call them out. Everybody stops. You stand up. You change your voice. You speak with authority. And everybody knows that when you stand up, they better shut up, because whatever you have to say is probably pretty important. And then you call that person out and you deliver a bombardment of words upon them, shaming them publicly. They're either going to want to go home and kill themselves, or they're going to want to move away. So the art of poetry is still very important. So I think of Finn McCool, Finn and the Fianna, that they were warriors, but they were warriors that were not tied to the people. I'm in my PJs. They were warriors that were not tied to the people in such a way. They were more tied to the land. They were like a war band, hired mercenaries. They were connected to nature. And they wandered. but they had to train as poets before they were allowed to fulfill their military training. And I think that's just a beautiful thing that, even today, poetry plays such an important role within Ireland. It's something that was not taken away, something that continually keeps growing, even within the native language, the native tongue. People are still producing poetry by the volumes today in a very respected, honorable way. And sometimes it's light and funny, but poetry can do that. So what else did these Druids do? Well, I mentioned Shawnee storytellers. Storytellers also trained for a very long time. I've had the pleasure of hearing some traditional storytelling on the west coast of Ireland. And these gentlemen were properly trained. Whatever training they had was proper. Because a good storyteller doesn't just tell a story. They transport you there. You are in the story. It is happening to you. You are directly affected emotionally. You can visually be there. And when it's over, it was like you were on a journey. It was like a very deep meditation, and you were there. It happened to you. You saw it. And there's lots that could be said in depth about the Shawnee and their role within society and storytelling as well, just like poetry. But that's another role that a Druid, a traditional Druid in Gaelic culture would have fulfilled. I need a pipe, because that one is out. Many to choose from. So, when I get back from getting this pipe, I will bring up... I'll continue with the warrior aspect. Sorry about that. So, the warrior aspect. It's not often mentioned, and it should be, that Druids fulfilled a role of teaching those the military training of tactics, and especially that of strategy when it came to battle. You can see this clearly in some of the stories with Cuchulainn. Getting a pipe. And it happens to be a Peterson, since we're talking about Irish things. So they did fulfill a role within military training, which means that they were also able to fight and go to war. Now, to rewind just a little bit, talking about the Shawnee, they were the memory, the repository of the tribe, of the Tuatha, of the people. They would remember the stories of place names and why they were called these places, and who died when, and who was born when, and who married whom, and why, and what the relationships were, and why this family is fighting with that family. And they were the genetic memory. They had a high value in the community. So we have them as philosophers, as judges, as Brehon, advisors to kings and chieftains and historians, as you see with the Shawnee, and poets and musicians, because at one time the poets were part of that caste system, if you would call it that people of the arts, training in the Druid aspect. So we have them as physicians, as healers, leechcraft, people that knew how to work with herbal lore, trees and plants for medicine. And I'm not talking anything magical here. I'm talking the actual science behind early medicine. It's reflected in the mythology. You want to call it mythology. I don't like calling it that, but you can. I don't like calling it mythology. I'll refer to it as mythology, but I really don't like the term mythology. Do Christians like when we call their faith mythology? Oh, that's just Christian mythology. They don't like that. Why should we have to accept that our ancestral customs, that our pagan ways, that our traditions are any less valid than theirs? If we're drawing upon the roots of our ancestors, then it's not mythology. If anything, our traditions and customs are here first. So that's just a personal hang-up that I have. You probably don't have that. Well, they even had the gods that dealt with healing, the Jin Ket. There's a lot of good stories about the herbs, because there's an H in it. But I can't say H because it's often a H. It's a H with a H sound. It's a H. So this division of what did they do that was non-spiritual? Everything that they did was spiritually connected. I mean, I could talk about them as astrologers, as seers, diviners, magicians, and the more stereotypical things that we associate with the Druid is, magic. For some reason, that's the thing that sticks. Hollywood, maybe. Have this concept of these druids are wizard-like, and they're off in these dark and forest groves, and they're just lurking on the edge of the community. And that's not the truth. They were in the community. They were with the people. They were a part of the daily life of the people. Now, did they have places that they went, that they brought their students for more privacy and things like that? Of course they did. But they were not walking around in these long white robes every day, all day long. Perhaps I'll do a video on that. I've talked about the concept of what Druids wore before in other videos. I think I'll take it a step further and really get into it. I did a blog on it. Some time ago. I think the title was called The Best Dressed Druids. It's pretty funny, but pretty well detailed as well. They wore different things depending on which role they were fulfilling in their community. Obviously, they're not going to wear what they wore to war as they would if they're doing a certain type of ritual, or if they're at a feast or banquet, or if they're out in the fields farming or helping doing something. They're going to wear appropriately what we would wear. You dress for the occasion. This idea we get from movies, and that the Druids lived with other Druids, and they were just this priestcraft. And they just kind of walked around like, Greek philosophers wearing togas, just kind of, all day long. No. You have to see them more like a rabbi and less like a priest. Highly educated, well respected, and accepted by the community. They fulfill the role of education, they fulfill the role of law, of history, of culture, and having to be present at these rituals. It's often a misconception that these druids, even in today, modern neo-druidry, that these druids are doing the rituals. Oftentimes they were just present at them. Their job being to oversee, to make sure that mistakes were avoided or not made during the rituals. The rituals were for the people, done by the people. Yes, druids had involvement in them, but just to have a bunch of druids standing around doing a ritual, that's not culturally accurate. It's not what our ancestors did. If you are more interested in things like in depth about these these shallow topics that I've covered on philosophers, advisors to kings, poets, storytellers, physicians, seers, and magicians, different roles that they fulfilled, a good book might be The Druids by Peter B. Ellis. His middle name is like Beresford. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but Peter Beresford Ellis, The Druids, is a good book because it brings you culturally the context of dates, names, places through a wide span, making comparison to other things cross-culturally as well that will help you understand their roles and what they were really about away from paganism, away from neo-druidry. It's more of a cultural examination of what do we know. So that's a really good book. Some people may not like it. You might not like it's not a hard book to read. But there's, like I mentioned, names, dates, places. So it does read more like history in a way. Or it's not a light read, but it's not hard reading. And I found it pretty enjoyable. So if you want to know more about the Druids, that's a great book to really pick up because it takes you out of this modern pagan structure. You think we know about all these things, and then you read something like that, it really makes you understand them more intimately. So, Heather, I hope you liked this video. It was a joy to do. And if anybody has any other requests, I'm gladly available to take them on and do a video for you. I have lots more videos to do that are on my list. Keep checking them off as they come along. Divination series should be really good, so I hope you stick around for the divination stuff. And on that, I guess I'll just end it. We're at about 30 minutes, guys, so thanks for sticking around. You would say thank you. You would say Guramahaga. Well, be excellent to each other. And until next time, Slangafol.